Hello, this is Rabbit's blog, and this is my first rant video. Today's rant is about animation in general. What is animation, you ask? Well, animation is a form of art that is used to tell a story about character society itself. You know, like how we use live action shows and movies to tell a story about the characters of the society. For many years, people used animation to express their emotions about a certain topic they wish to share to the world. So, what happened to that level of thinking? I'll tell you what happened. Many people started to think that animation was geared only towards kids. Now, before I get into why many people think that, I would like to discuss about some of the animation on the three big kids networks, Nickelodeon, Cartoon Network, and Disney Channel, that made a huge difference in the world of animation. Nicktoons are cartoons created by Nickelodeon, hence the name Nicktoons. So I like to start off this discussion by talking about the Nicktoons that were very popular among the fans, but suffered a lot of criticism due to the constraints of they gotta be kid friendly. Let's start off with Rocko's Modern Life. Rocko's Modern Life was a show about an Australian wallaby named Rocco who moves to America and has wacky adventures with his two best friends, Heifer and Filbert. Now, this show was big during the 90s. However, it was heavily criticized because of the sexual humor, which led to some episodes being banned from airing on Nickelodeon. Another Nicktoon on Nickelodeon was Hey Arnold, which is about a kid named Arnold who tries to make the best of his life in the city. While it was not as heavily criticized as Rocko's Modern Life, it did have some issues that would not show up in cartoons these days, such as the episode where Arnold is mugged and the episode where Harold and his friends moon the principal. Again, Hey Arnold was a very popular show in the day, but the issues being discussed in that show won't be shown on cartoons these days. The next Nicktoon you're going to talk about is Invader Zim. Now, who doesn't remember Invader Zim? It was basically about an alien named Zim who tries to prove himself to the leaders of his planet that he can be a great invader. Okay, so this show was very popular among the fans. But what did Nickelodeon do to the show? They cancel it. And why, you ask? The show was very popular, so why cancel it? It turns out it was canceled because of the fact that this show did have some disturbing content that would scare the younger kids, despite its effectiveness in providing good humor. But because the show wasn't popular among the younger audience, Nickelodeon had to cancel it. Also, another reason that Invader Zim was canceled probably had something to do with budgeting issues, which would make a lot of sense considering that this show combined 2D animation with 3D animation. The last Nicktoon I'm going to talk about is Avatar: The Last Airbender. It's about a young airbender named Aang, who has to defeat Fire Lord Ozai to save the world. Now, Nickelodeon was definitely getting somewhere with this show. Avatar: The Last Airbender had a very well developed plot, intriguing characters, and superb animation that made this show one of the most brilliant Nicktoons to ever premiere on Nickelodeon. So, how was this show treated? Well, even though this was one of the highest rated shows on Nickelodeon, and it did have a perfect ending, Nickelodeon denied it reruns and aired the second half of the third season late into July because of the fact that this show also grabbed the adults' interest as well as the kids. Now I'd like to discuss the cartoons on Cartoon Network. The first cartoon I'm going to mention is Captain Planet. Captain Planet is a show about 5 kids from around the world, along with Captain Planet, who try to help keep the world a safe and clean place to live. Captain Planet was another cartoon in the 90s that was extremely popular, and yet nowadays it wouldn't even get past the conception of cartoons these days because of the environmental themes the show displayed. Another cartoon that was very popular but controversial was the Powerpuff Girls, which is about 3 young girls saving the world before bedtime. Even though it was one of Cartoon Network's most successful shows, it was also criticized due to the extreme violence in every episode. There's not much to say about Disney Channel due to the fact that there was a lack of cartoons on this channel because of Hannah Montana. So I'm just going to mention one show, and that's Phineas and Ferb. Phineas and Ferb is about the misadventures of two brothers, Phineas and Ferb, and how they try to think of creative ways to spend their summer vacation. This was one of the few shows during the 2000s that actually explores the limits of a child's imagination, just like Rugrats did. And the show was very well written and the jokes were very funny and witty. Of course, luckily the show is still running as it is fairly new. Now that you've heard of the various cartoons that made an impact on the animation industry, but were criticized for not following the norm for cartoons, I'd like to go back to the question. Why do many people believe that animation is for kids only? Well, to answer to that question, it's probably because many kids do love anything that is animated, and animation is usually presented with colorful and lively characters. And when you are making cartoons, you can make the situations of characters easily unrealistic, which is sometimes difficult to do with live action shows, and that is also interesting with kids. However, there were a couple of anime shows that did talk about adult issues, and yet the issues were presented in a creative way. For example, you had Captain Planet that was animated, but presented issues of environmental concerns in a creative way. I mean, what other cartoon uses a blue-skinned superhero to teach kids about environmentalism? Or even the animated version of X-Men that not only shows us some awesome fighting moves, but also shows us about how terrible prejudice against other people is, especially when the prejudice was shown against the mutants in the show. The only animated industry that I think actually looks at animation as art is anime. Anime like Sailor Moon and Dragon Ball Z are all entertaining to kids, while some anime like Fooly Cooly and Death Note are entertaining to adults. But overall, anime touch on issues that many adults may be interested in, such as themes of religion, extreme violence, and prejudice, and sexual humor. To me, animation is art because animators can go beyond the limits with animation, such as presenting unrealistic and surreal environments for the situations they throw their characters into. Just because you can make animation as unrealistic as possible doesn't mean that adults can't enjoy it as much as the kids can. I mean, look at shows like The Simpsons, King of the Hill, and South Park. They are animated, yet they are aimed at the adults. Yes, while it is true that many kids love animation, the most notable animated shows were also well liked by both the adults and kids, such as Looney Tunes and the Flintstones. That's not to say that the anime shows that were aimed at kids weren't successful. I mean, look at Arthur and Madeline. Those two shows were created for mainly kids, and yet they were very successful in their runs and made a huge impact on society as a whole. Therefore, animation can be liked by anyone, depending on what mood or story the creators want to present in their shows. Well, that's it for my rant. I have noticed that there are a couple of cartoons that I didn't mention, but that was because I was running out of time on this rant. So, if there are any other cartoons that you'd like to mention, feel free to comment on them and tell me how they made a difference in the world of animation. Stay tuned for part 2 of my animation rant. See you soon!